From the campus of the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, the Utah Debate Commission welcomes you to the Gubernatorial Republican Primary Candidate Debate.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's debate with Republican primary candidates running to be Utah's governor. I'm Caroline Ballard of KUER NPR Utah. It's my pleasure to moderate tonight's discussion, sponsored by the Utah Debate Commission, an organization dedicated to educating voters and encouraging the civil exchange of ideas. The candidates are Spencer Cox and Phil Lyman. If you are watching or listening live, you're welcome to send your reactions and questions on social media to the hashtag UTDebates. The format for this debate is as follows. Each candidate will have a predetermined time to respond to the questions, and on occasion there will be rebuttal time. A random drawing held prior to the debate determined that candidate Lyman will get the initial response to the first question. We'll then alternate turns on the remaining questions throughout the debate. All right, let's get started. And opening with this first question, as predetermined, we'll go to Mr. Lyman. So starting us off, what is it about you specifically that makes you the best person for this job?
Thank you, Carolyn, and it's good to be here tonight. Thomas Sowell said, if you want to help people, tell them the truth. If you want to help yourself, tell them what they want to hear. And I've kind of taken that in my CPA firm as a mantra. Do people want the comforting myth or the harsh reality? And I'm willing to tell people the harsh reality. That's kind of what I do. And in Utah, we've got some harsh realities that we need to face. There's a lot of collusion, a lot of corruption that takes place in the policy making of Utah. These things that I've observed both at the county level, it's at the federal level, and at the state level, those things lead to bad policies that actually end up hurting people's lives. And I feel like we're at a point that it could become a crisis. And the good news of that is that there is a cure, and the cure is that people have a chance to vote. They have a chance to vote for a governor and lieutenant governor that will tell them the truth and the harsh reality.
Thank you. Mr. Cox.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here with you tonight. As a kid who grew up in the small town of Fairview in Sanpete County on a tractor, I never thought I would get an opportunity to serve in this position. They just don't let kids from Sanpete County do stuff like this. It's been an honor to serve as your governor over the past 4 years, as lieutenant governor before that for 7.5 years. I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish over these past 4 years. We passed the largest tax cuts in our state history ×5. We gave the largest raises to our teachers in our state's history, making us, for the first time ever, starting salaries in the top 10. People told me that would never be able to happen. And we gave parents more school choice. We've also protected life in our state, the life of the unborn. And we're holding social media companies accountable and empowering parents. There are so many other things we've been able to accomplish. I'm so proud of Utah. I've never been more optimistic about who we are and what we can accomplish when we work together.
Housing affordability is a high priority for Utahns, especially after reports comparing median housing prices and wages estimate that Utah is one of the most expensive states in the nation. If elected, what would you do to make housing more affordable in our state? This question is for Mr. Cox.
Yeah. So, look, this is the single most important issue in our state right now. There is nothing that will hurt our state more in the future if our kids and grandkids can't afford to live here. And that's why I don't need to tell you what I can do. I'll tell you what we've already done. This past session, we worked tirelessly with legislators to pass the most comprehensive housing reform in the United States. Every state is looking at what's happening in Utah. We have to build 35,000 starter homes in this state. We have to make sure that our kids can own real property again. That is the American dream. So we are working with developers right now. They're going to be able to get loans. We're working with them to build these starter homes. These are homes under $300,000. That's where we're headed. That's what we're going to do. Look, this is a problem across the United States. It's a problem in every state. It's a problem in the developed world. Canada, the UK, everyone is struggling. Only Utah has the solutions, and you're going to see these homes start being built starting in just a few months.
Mr. Lyman, same question. If elected, what would you do to make housing more affordable?
Well, this is the comforting myth that we like to tell ourselves is that government is going to fix this problem. The truth is that free market principles are going to fix this problem. We have land in Utah. Senator Lee has got a Houses Act that will transfer some of that public land that makes sense, make it available to young people who want to build a house, who can't afford a house. Yeah, a median house price of $546,000. There is no way that young kids coming out of college can afford to have a house on a single family income or even on a double family income. We've got to do something to address the regulation costs. Right now, if you want to build a single-family home, it's almost impossible because all of the incentive is to build high-density housing in population areas that are already densely populated, or to build commercial buildings, or to go and build large mansions for people who can afford to pay for those. It's the small people that are getting left out. It's the average homeowner that's getting left out, and that's because of the policies that we put in place. And throwing money at it is not going to fix the problem.
Utah continues to grow rapidly. It's also one of the driest states in the country. What can the state do to guarantee sufficient water supplies for people moving here now and for future generations? Mr. Lyman.
Yeah, we do live in a desert, and so we're always cognizant of the water that we're using. We recognize that it's a limited resource. We have about 60 million acre-feet of water that fall on the state of Utah. We divert about 6 million feet of that, so a small percentage of that gets diverted into our reservoirs and our pipelines. Infrastructure is needed. We can divert more of that if we had the resources to do it. A healthy forest generates more water than an unhealthy forest. All of these things that we run into are roadblocks that the federal government puts in our way because we can't go on the forest to clean up the forest. We can't build the pipelines and the reservoirs that we need to supply that additional water. So instead, we go and we start spending more taxpayer money to buy up the water shares of alfalfa farmers, denigrating our alfalfa farmers, and when what we should be doing is improving our forests, improving the water supply, improving our infrastructure that delivers that water to the people in Utah. That's the solution that that's the solution that is going to fix this problem.
Mr. Cox.
Yeah, look, this is one of the issues. We are a fast-growing state because we have kids and grandkids, and they need to be able to live here. I'm so proud of what we've done with water over the past couple years. We have changed over 180 years of water law in our state, and we are protecting our ag community. $250 million in investment in ag optimization so that our farmers can continue to grow more food with less water. That's freeing up water for development, for our kids and grandkids so that they can live here. I'm proud of how Utahns have responded. There's been a true sea change in the way we are approaching water. People understand that we do live in a desert. They're changing their habits. One of the most incredible things happened, Caroline, I have to share this with the people. Last year, we had the greatest water year in our state's history, and every single expert told me that water usage would go up in a wet year, as it always has, and it did not. For the first time in our state's history, in a wet year, water usage stayed flat because we are changing it. Over $1 billion in investment from the legislature over the past 2 years in water conservation. We are surviving in this desert.
Mr. Cox, we should move on. With the Dobbs case, the U.S. Supreme Court returned the regulation of abortion to the states. We've seen a wide range of new laws nationwide, and that's caused some concern for Republican voters. Do you believe states should control abortion laws, and what should Utah's laws be? Mr. Cox.
Well, Utah's laws should be exactly what they are. We've been working on this for years in anticipation that finally the Supreme Court would do the right thing. This is something that should have happened 40 years ago. Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided, and it took that issue away from the states, which is why it has become so polarizing over the past 40 years. If you look at places like Europe and others, they've been able to figure this out without the animosity. Finally, we have a Supreme Court that did the right thing in returning this to the states. And we have worked very closely with the legislature to implement, again, we're protecting life, implement new laws that will protect life in our state. Now, there is a lawsuit going forward. We feel confident that we're going to win that lawsuit, but we've already taken care of this. So this is what states are supposed to do. The federal government is way too involved in major decisions. This is one that should be left to the states, and I'm really proud about Utah's solution.
Mr. Lyman, same question. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's okay. So the legislature's been very active in this. I'm in the legislature currently in my 6th year there. And we saw this opportunity to send a strong message to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, by the way, that was well positioned because of the appointments that were made by President Trump, and we felt that this was going to be a decision that came through. So we passed legislation that made Utah a state that would not have abortion when this bill came through. By the same token, the people of Utah, the people of the United States, they're the ones that were responsible for getting Roe v. Wade overturned, because they recognized and they appealed to heaven, and they appealed to their legislators to stop the slaughter of our innocent children. And this is important. If we believe in the sanctity of life, then we do more than just write strongly worded letters. We stand up. We go to bat for these things. Honest people have rights too, and no place is that more important than in the lives of the unborn people. And I'm so proud of my colleagues in the legislature and the other people in this state that value that so dearly.
This next question is a video question from a political science major at Weber State University. Let's see that.
Hello, my name is Brexton Oleski Lee. I am a political science major at Weber State University, and my question is about the nationalization of our state legislature. As the political climate in our country has become more polarized over the past decade, it seems as though an increasing number of the laws that come out of our state legislature are more focused on the national conversation while neglecting to address the issues at the state and local level. As a student, I was shocked to find out that many of the laws impacting education that came out of this year's session were based on model legislation that was not even written in our state. While these laws garner many headlines, they do little to address the needs of working families like my own. If elected, how would you address this issue, and what would you do to encourage the state legislature to get back to addressing state and local issues unique to Utah?
Mr. Lyman, first response to you.
Brexton, that's a great question, and it's actually near and dear to my heart, because what I've seen in the legislature is legislation that's coming from the top down. It's not supposed to happen that way. It's supposed to come from the bottom up. We're elected as representatives of 45,000, 46,000 people in the House of Representatives. We bring that legislation, things that are important to our constituents and to our districts, and we bring that to the legislature, and we argue those things, and we present those bills. What we've seen these last few years is an extremely top-down approach to legislation. Things that are coming from we don't know where, but they come through the governor's office, through the UEOC, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, created to work with stakeholders and the Speaker and the President of the Senate and the Governor, and then we show up to committees, and these bills are presented to us as if they are must-pass bills, and they don't address local issues. They're coming down sometimes from outside the country, from the World Economic Forum or from the United Nations or from other think tanks that are national or international. That's not the way we do legislation in Utah. It should be from the bottom up, and parents have to be involved in these decisions on education.
Mr. Cox.
Sure, yeah. So look, we have an amazing legislature, and I'm so fortunate that I get to work with them every day. Yes, there are probably a few bills that come through some of these national organizations, model bills. That's been true forever. That's what we do. We steal ideas from other states. When somebody has a good idea, we take those ideas. That's the laboratory of democracy that we're supposed to be. I can tell you that far too many people, the problem is that people don't pay enough attention to what the legislature is doing. About 590 bills were passed last legislative session, which I think are too many. Nevertheless, the vast majority of those bills, well over 80% and close to 90%, were unanimous or near unanimous, and dealing with very hyper-local issues. I would encourage you to actually go look at all 590 of those bills. And what you'll see is that, yes, there are 10 or 20 of them that get a lot of national attention and get people fired up, and those are the ones the media covers. But that is not the legislature. There is so much more happening at the local level.
The Utah Fits All Scholarship provides vouchers for home or private schooling. The teacher union, the Utah Education Association, contends in a lawsuit that the scholarship violates the Utah Constitution's requirement that education be free and open to all. Do you believe the Utah Fits All program needs modification? Why or why not? Mr. Cox.
Yeah, I don't believe it needs modification, and I think that lawsuit is going to fail. Look, this was one of the most important bills we've passed in our state's history. It did two things. The first thing it did was to give the largest raises to our teachers in our state's history. It also brought, again, Utah's starting teacher salaries into the top 10 in the United States. I was told when I made that a goal, when I became governor, that there was no way that would ever happen. We now have a starting salary that is greater in Utah than all of our surrounding states, and that's something I'm very proud of. The second thing that it did was to provide more school choice for those students who need it. Sadly, private school, other options have only been the purview of the wealthiest in our state. What we did was set aside a very, very small portion of the overall funding for education in our state to help those families who need other options, families who are struggling, kids who are being bullied, kids who need special access that they just can't get otherwise. We were able to do both of those things, and it's something every Utahn should be proud of.
Mr. Lyman, do you believe the Utah Fits All program needs modification?
There are probably some tweaks that need to happen to the Utah Fits All, but it's a good program. The idea being that the money follows the student. So if the parents want to pull their children out of a public school and put them in a charter school or homeschool them, then they will keep the money themselves. And it was a small amount of money that was earmarked for that. The one thing that I'd like to see more on that is more autonomy with these parents and more involvement with their public schools. It's a sad commentary in our system, in our state school board and our 42 school districts and school boards. There's a little bit of a regiment that's taken place there where people are coerced to stay in line and to stay in line with the school board and with the agenda. If we could push that in power back to the parents, back to those local community school councils, the parent councils for each of those schools, I think instead of having parents pulling their kids out of school, taking that money with them, they would be saying, we want to keep our kids in the public schools. My children are a product of public schools. We loved it, and we would love to see more parental involvement and more kids staying in the public school system.
For our next question, we have another video question from a political science major at Utah State University. Here's that question.
My name is Bruce. I'm a political science major at Utah State University. Thanks for taking my question. I wonder what you think about mandating more serious and nuanced study of government in our high schools and at our universities, since that seems to me like really striking at the heart of our problems. We need citizens who can engage responsibly and effectively with government.
Mr. Lyman.
Well, thanks, Bruce. And that is an interesting question. When we start to tell the schools what they need to teach and what the curriculum needs to be, we start to walk a fine line. I go back to these parental councils to say what is it that you want in your schools? What would you like to have these students taught? Yes, students should understand what it means to be American. One of the things it means to be American is that we are free to think and free to do these things. I'm not a big fan of mandating a lot of things on teachers. I'm not a fan of mandating a lot of things on schools. I am a fan of parents being involved. I'm a fan of teachers listening to their students, drawing out from those students who they are as an individual, letting them express themselves in a way that is fulfilling to them, and let them know that in this world, especially in this country, you have freedoms. And that if we teach the kids that, if we teach them about, that is what the Constitution teaches. And if we teach them, number one, that they are free in America, I think that they would start naturally to learn about the Constitution, learn about the Declaration of Independence, learn about these things, and take a big interest in what makes this country so great.
Mr. Cox.
Yeah, Bruce, thank you for that question, and go Aggies. It's nice to see a fellow Aggie asking a really important question. First of all, I want to give a shout out to our public schools. I'm so proud of our public schools. My kids, too, are products of our public schools. We have some of the best teachers in the world right here in the state of Utah. And the answer to your question is absolutely yes. Yes, we do need more civic education taught in our high schools, our middle schools, our elementary schools. We do need the next generation of Americans to understand who we are as a country and why we are as a country. We need them to understand the founding documents of this country, including the Declaration of Independence, and this idea that our freedoms, that are these rights, these God-given rights, they don't come from a king, they don't come from government, they come from on high, and it's government's job to protect them. And among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those are the values that our kids need to learn so that they can make proper choices, so that they can lead us as we move forward as a country. I'm desperately worried about what's happening on college campuses. We need better civic education.
Mr. Cox, let's move on. The International Olympic Committee is expected to make its final vote in July on whether Salt Lake City hosts the 2034 Winter Games. Yesterday, organizers released their first budget estimates for those games. Total projected costs are just under $4 billion. But Olympics frequently go over budget. If the games do return, what should Utah's financial responsibility be to host the Winter Olympics? And Mr. Cox.
Yeah, this is the easiest question we'll get all night. Utah's financial responsibility should be zero, and it will be zero. That's the best part about the Olympics coming back. Look, you guys, this is incredible, an incredible opportunity for our state. The second time we hosted the Olympics in 2002, it was the most successful Winter Olympics in history. Did not go over budget. In fact, there was a windfall that came to the state of about $100 million. We very wisely took that money and invested it back into these Olympic venues, so that if we had to, we could host the Olympics 6 months from now. We are the first state, the first country in the history of the Olympics that won't have to build a single venue. All of this is going to be paid for by sponsorships. It's not going to cost the tax dollars a single penny, and we should be proud of that. I can't wait to represent the state of Utah in Paris on July 24th, a special day for Utah, when I will be there and the final vote will be taken, and with any luck, we'll be signing that agreement to bring the Olympics back to Utah in 2034.
Mr. Lyman, same question.
So I remember the last Olympics and the luge, as they called it, on I-15. The cost of infrastructure, the cost of delays, the cost of congestion. It brings a lot of people to Utah. It brings a lot of people to Salt Lake City. Those who are not close to the action tend to be able to watch from afar. It goes back to a little bit of what Utah has recently come out and said we have an elite economy, which is where a few get to participate and the rest get to be spectators. And that's kind of what I see as the Olympics. When I talk to people out on the street, even here in Salt Lake, do you want the Olympics? And they said, why? Why would we want the Olympics? Now, I love the Olympics. I love watching it go. I know it's a huge economic driver, but it is tremendous cost to our city, to our state, and to the people who live in Utah. I don't believe if you took a poll in Utah that it would overwhelmingly be in favor of paying for and bringing the Olympics to Utah in 2030. Besides that, you've got all of the regulations for climate agreements that are tied to that.
Thank you. We have a rebuttal from Mr. Cox, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just have to point out, we actually did take a poll. It just came out yesterday, and 79% of Utahns are excited for the Olympics to come back. 79%. In this day and age, it is impossible to get 79% of anybody to agree on anything. So I'm not sure who my colleague is talking to, but what I can tell you is that this is by far the highest anywhere in the world, the highest poll taken of a country, of a state where people are excited for the Olympics to come back, and it is not going to cost us anything to host those Olympics.
Mr. Lyman, 30 seconds for a response.
I don't know. I haven't seen the poll. If it's another Harris X poll, another Twitter poll conducted on the Wasatch Front, you might find that kind of a response. My response comes from talking to people in their neighborhoods, on the street. And I'm not saying that the Olympics is unpopular. We all love the Olympics, but to bring it to Utah, to bring the Olympics to Utah, again, is a cost to our state and to our counties and to our communities. And to say otherwise is being disingenuous.
While we're on the topics of sports, we have a follow-up to that. We'll go in the same order as well. And this is a question from social media from Richard Olson, who says, please explain your stance on providing millions of dollars to professional sports team stadiums. So many other large cities have found that it doesn't give a good return on investment, only benefits a very few, and burdens surrounding localities with additional taxes. Larry Miller built the Delta Center, and I don't recall him asking the state for millions. Mr. Cox, first answer here. Same order as since it's a follow-up.
Okay, my apologies. Yes, so look, the Larry H. Miller Group, when they built the Delta Center, they did very similar to what we're doing here. The truth is, if you live outside of this area, outside of Salt Lake City, you will not pay a dime for anything that's happening there. All the legislature did was give Salt Lake City the opportunity to raise sales tax in Salt Lake City by 0.5%. That's all that happened for the hockey stadium. The voters of Salt Lake, the mayor, the city council members, they will make that decision. So I believe this is the very best way. It protects taxpayers. It gives us an opportunity. This is a huge opportunity for the state, not just from economic development, but an opportunity for so many people who, again, are excited to have the NHL here, maybe Major League Baseball in the future. Again, there's nothing happening with Major League Baseball right now. The only thing that is moving forward is the National Hockey League, and what we've done is just give authority to Salt Lake City to decide if this is what they want to do in their city.
Mr. Lyman.
Could you repeat that question?
Absolutely. It was from online. Let me, I think the gist of it is professional sports stadiums, should we be funding it? And if, oh, thank you for that. Please explain your stance on providing millions of dollars to professional sports teams, stadiums. So many other large cities have found that it doesn't give a good return on investment, only benefits a very few, and burdens surrounding localities with additional taxes. Larry Miller built the Delta Center, and I don't recall him asking the state for millions.
Thank you. Sorry to make you repeat that. I wasn't sure if it was specific to hockey or baseball. But the fact is that these investments, when you take $1 billion of taxpayer money and put it into a stadium, that's not the same thing as personal money. That creates an ongoing liability for the taxpayers. I love baseball. I love hockey. I love to see these things, built in our communities. I'm grateful for the contributions of some of our philanthropists and their investments that they've made into the community. But to step into that space as a legislature has been confusing to me. I don't see it as the proper role of government. If Salt Lake County wants to do it, then I think the legislature should stay out of Salt Lake County's affairs in that regard, but it's not staying out of it. It's coming to the legislature. We're being asked to weigh in on that. And the first bill that comes up is, do you like baseball? If so, now the second bill that comes up is, do you want to spend $1 billion on a Major League Baseball stadium? And the answer to that is not of taxpayer money and not on the basis of what we've seen happen in other cities and other places around the country where they are a tremendous liability.
We have now reached the halfway point of the debate featuring the Republican candidates for Utah's governor. Once again, I'm Caroline Ballard. We encourage you to submit questions during this live broadcast. Use the hashtag UTDebates on social media. Now, let's get back to the debate. We have another question from online. This comes from Rob Norbut in Salt Lake City, who asks, what is your stance on the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, and U.S. Forest Service restricting public land use in Utah? What is your stance on public land use in Utah, camping, hunting, OHV, and free-range cattle use? This first question goes to Mr. Lyman.
You know, when I got into the legislature a few years ago, the buzzword up there was transfer public lands, transfer the federal lands to the state ownership. And I said, well, that happened. That was 1896. That's what that little boundary means that defines the state of Utah. Utah was given jurisdiction. Prior to that, we were a territory. We didn't even elect our own governor. What I've seen happen is that the state has a level of jurisdiction that they're unwilling to assert. For example, on roads, the state owns the roads across BLM land, the state and the county, 100%, with no federal involvement in those roads at all. Yet we don't assert that. And if someone does assert it, they don't get the backup from the county, from the state, that they should have. The same thing on these public lands. I believe that there's a healthy tension right now. We love our public lands. We love that in Utah. When the federal government has ownership and the state has jurisdiction, that creates a tension that benefits the individuals. When the federal government starts to exercise too much jurisdiction, that's a problem for the individuals. I think the same thing would happen if you transferred all of the ownership and jurisdiction to the state. You'd start to see more of this cronyism and mismanagement.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Cox.
Yeah, look, the federal government is out of control. I think both my opponent and I, when we ran for the legislature, we ran on this issue those of us from rural Utah understand better than anyone what the federal government is doing to limit and destroy our access to federal lands. The BLM, the Forest Service, these are supposed to be managed for multiple use. Unfortunately, they're being mismanaged. Roads are being closed. We right now have literally thousands of lawsuits on opening roads and more to come, more in the future as we're working with the Attorney General. We've sued the Biden administration over 60 times just in the past few years, and many of those are related to our public lands, and there are more of those to come as well. We cannot let a federal government based in Washington, D.C., and that has been taken over by extreme environmentalists make decisions that are keeping us from being able to go out and camp and hike and hunt and do the things that we have done for generations on public lands. We know how to protect and manage these public lands better than anyone in this country.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Mr. Lyman, 30 seconds.
Yeah, suing the federal government is not a good option. And this is what they've done with our roads. They close the roads, and then we're expected to go and sue until those roads are adjudicated. They're off limits. I passed a bill this last session that says if the federal government does not follow the adjudication of that road in advance, then the state will consider that road open and free to the people. It's an important thing because we're closing 317 miles of roads in Grand County right now, hundreds of miles in Kane County, Uintah County, all over the state. The state has got to step into this space and say, we're just not going to do it. A lawsuit is not enough. We've got to say no.
Thank you. Mr. Cox, 30 seconds.
Well, look, a lawsuit is exactly what we have to do. That's where we get the adjudication, and we have a Supreme Court that we know for the first time in a long, long time is going to be much more sympathetic to our pleas and to the legal arguments that we need. And this is so much bigger, again, than any one road. We're talking about national monuments, millions of acres that have been locked up to prevent Utahns from using them, to prevent Utahns from having the opportunity. Now, look, we need to protect our national parks, those iconic places, absolutely, but we need to make sure that the people of Utah get access to those lands.
Thank you. As the head of Utah's executive branch, to what degree should a governor employ aggressive rhetoric in pursuit of the administration's goals? Do policy successes outweigh preserving interpersonal niceties? This goes to Mr. Cox.
Well, look, several of these questions, and far too often we get presented with false choices. This is one of those questions that is absolutely a false choice. Look, I'm very proud to be a conservative Utahn. I'm proud of what we have been able to accomplish throughout the course of our administration. But I also believe the way we do things matter. And I'm so proud of the way we have been able to conduct ourselves, the way we treat people with dignity and respect, while also passing some of the most important and conservative legislation anywhere in the country. So being a governor is a heavy weight. I don't just represent Republicans. I represent the entire state. I represent everyone. And our state gets judged by the way that I conduct myself. And so this is something that I've made very clear. I'm proud to have been elected by Republican governors to serve as the chair of the National Governors Association, working really hard to make sure that we treat even our enemies with dignity and respect, but we make sure that the policy is the correct policy. And often that is the very best conservative laws in the land, and Utah is leading the nation.
Mr. Lyman, same question. Would you like me to repeat the question?
If you wouldn't mind.
As the head of Utah's executive branch, to what degree should a governor employ aggressive rhetoric in pursuit of the administration's goals? Do policy successes outweigh preserving interpersonal niceties?
Thank you. The truth is you've got external forces who are not using fair tactics to try to take away what belongs to Utah. They're trying to lock up our energy. They're trying to lock up our land. They're trying to shut down our industries. They sue our counties. They go after our people. They raid the homes of our people. They hurt people's lives. And if we say, well, we should use polite words when we talk to these people, I'm not against polite words, but there's a point where we have to use aggressive rhetoric. I'm a huge fan of governors who speak candidly and frankly. Ron DeSantis comes to mind. Kristi Noem comes to mind. Utah should have a governor who stands up for the people, who speaks frankly, who is understood. And at the end of that conversation, people should know exactly where he stands on these issues. I've looked at governors in the past in Utah. I've told the federal government to back off, to stand down, and the federal government does it. That's what we've got to be able to do, and we've got to recognize that this is not an organic thing. These agencies, the federal government is being weaponized by people that we would would never allow to make policy decisions for Utah.
How do you balance the need for immigrant labor against the need for a secure border? And this first response goes to Mr. Lyman.
Yeah, the key term in illegal immigration is illegal. There are ways to enter this country legally. I've got good friends who were here illegally. They left the country so that they could come back in legally because they wanted all of the privileges, all of the benefits that come from being in the United States legally. It may be a high hurdle to overcome, and I'd love to see that hurdle reduced. But it doesn't justify us welcoming in illegal aliens, and our policies do that. Our policies make us a magnet for illegal immigration. You can see by the numbers. And not only that, our policies make us a magnet for non-citizens with criminal intent because of the way that we treat the detention angle of this. We've got to take a more aggressive stance. We've got to be able to deport those people. And our policies should be able to distinguish between a mother who's a refugee and a person who's here, a predator with fentanyl dealers. And somehow we seem to lump all of those together when we're talking about policy. And that is not what good policy does.
Mr. Cox, same question on balancing the need.
Yeah. Again, this is one of those false choices where we have to pick one or the other. That's not true at all. And I have to say, everything that my opponent said is absolutely true. The Biden administration has completely failed this country when it comes to the border. Every state is a border state right now. Every single state, millions, literally millions, in just the past year of illegal immigrants are being bused and flown to every state in this nation. We cannot long stay a nation if we can't secure our borders. That has to be paramount. It's the first thing we have to do. And we have to fix legal immigration. Legal immigration has been a disaster in this country, and we need good people. Here's one of the crazy things we do, ladies and gentlemen. We bring people here to our universities like this one. Some of the brightest people in the world, PhDs, people who are creating businesses, and people who want to be here, and then we make them leave. We force them to leave this country while at the same time letting in anyone and everyone, criminals, people who are distributing fentanyl. So many bad actors are coming across that border, and we have to hold this administration accountable.
We have another question from social media, this time from X. Shirley Larson asks, what do you think of laws that are passed that put burdens on cities and counties, such as laws to deal with homelessness? Sometimes these laws are unfunded. And first response goes to Mr. Cox.
Yeah, look, so I had the opportunity to serve as a city council member and a mayor and a county commissioner in my small town. There is, I will admit, nothing more maddening than when the legislature puts unfunded mandates on our cities and towns. Worked really hard to try not to do that, to try to work with the legislature to prevent those types of bills from moving forward. You just brought up homelessness specifically. This is one area where we have gotten more involved because homelessness should not just be seen as a Salt Lake City or a Salt Lake County issue. Homelessness is something that affects everyone in this state. If you're homeless in Fairview, where I grew up, you don't stay in Fairview. You end up going to Salt Lake where the resources are. And so we've worked very closely, again, with the legislature. I'm proud of what we were able to do this year, working very closely to get additional resources and funding, and, again, holding people accountable for those additional resources. But this is something where the state does have to play a bigger role.
Same question to Mr. Lyman.
This is one of those issues where, as a legislator, it's always frustrating to see us taking powers away from the local governments, away from the counties, overstepping our bounds with them. We don't like it when the federal government does it to us, and counties do not like it. As a county commissioner, I watch the same thing happen. Mandates that come down from the state, funded or unfunded, are inappropriate. What should happen is that counties, municipalities, localities make the decisions that they're most affected by. As soon as the legislature steps into that space and says, well, we've got the expertise to make a decision that your county or your municipality simply doesn't have the expertise to handle, what we're doing is overstepping. We're going against reality because those people understand better what's affecting their communities than the bureaucracies and the people that are making those decisions at the state legislature. The policies that we have in Utah are to let counties, municipalities make their own decisions, and the legislature should respect that and stay out of those things. And we should be pushing more of the resources and decision making and authority to the counties on the front end.
While we're talking about the state's role with cities and counties. A follow-up question to both of you will go in the same order again. What do you think of efforts by the legislature to overturn ballot measures that passed by the voters? Mr. Cox.
Yeah, sure. So thank you. The ultimate, according to the Constitution, the ultimate authority when it comes to lawmaking in this state, it ends with the legislature. So yes, the people have the ability to pass laws, and they can. The legislature also has the ability to amend those laws, but it should only be used very rarely. I've always said that I think it's a mistake when we overturn the will of the people. I think it's a good way to get voted out of office. I think that again, decisions made by the people are always better. And so only in the rarest of circumstances should we be overturning those. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes a ballot initiative passes where there are issues with the initiative, the implementation of the initiative, where that can't happen. But by and large, I do think it should be rare when we have citizen-led initiatives. But when those initiatives pass, we should try the best that we possibly can to respect the will of the people.
Mr. Lyman, same question.
Citizen initiatives and referendums are a valuable part of the way we run the government. They do ultimately have the authority to do those things. The legislature has stepped in recent years, making it harder for those initiatives to pass, harder for those referendums to get through. There's a signature gathering process that is onerous for those people that want to gather signatures and pass a referendum. And then the hurdle of clearing those signatures has been also onerous with the Lieutenant Governor's office who counts those signatures. We should make that process more liquid, more available to the people. I recognize the problems that come with that. Those are the problems that come with liberty. And I'd rather have the problems of too much citizen input than too little citizen input. If they understand that they can pass laws, maybe the representatives would be more responsive to those needs of the citizens on the front end rather than forcing it into a place where they're going and getting a referendum.
Let's move on to a new topic. This year, the state legislature passed SB 240. This law makes elected officials' calendars private, not public documents. Do you think the governor's official calendar should be a public document? This goes first to Mr. Lyman.
That was an interesting bill. And if on the front end, if you understand that what you're putting on your calendar is public, I'm all for making that public. The problem with this bill is that it came in after the fact and said, whatever's on that calendar, we want to see it. That's an invasion of a person's privacy. They should at least be able to go through and say, well, if I'm going to turn that calendar over to the public, there may be some things on there of a personal nature that I would not include in that calendar. I would love it in our GRAMA government records requests if all of the records were available. And we're going to get to that point in the state with AI and the ability to redact records automatically to where people have so much access to the information. But as far as an individual's personal life, whether you're a legislator or a governor, you still have a personal life and you're entitled to that privacy.
Mr. Cox, same question.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Look, whether it's public or private, I've always felt that my calendar should be public. We've always made my calendar public, and we will continue to make my calendar public. But that's the right answer. It was not clear that, in fact, it was pretty clear that it was not a public document, and then there was a push to make those public, and the legislature responded accordingly. So that's the right answer, and I will, if reelected, I will continue to make my calendar public.
The state of Utah passed a law this year that will force a coal-fired power plant to stay open past the dates its company intended. That company was not in favor of how the state went about this. Should the state government be involved in determining private business policy? Why or why not? First to Mr. Cox.
Yeah. So, in general, the state government should not get involved in private affairs. The creation of power and electricity in our state has always been outside of just purely private affairs. We do need the market to function, and if it was a true private market, I would have no problem whatsoever. But that's not the case. This is a coal plant that is owned and operated by mostly the predominant owner of this is California. And California is trying to shut this down at a time when we are desperate for more power and electricity in this state. We haven't even begun to see the repercussions of what's going to happen just over the next few months and years. We are not generating nearly enough power for the grid. We've seen brownouts in Texas. We've seen brownouts in places like California. And Utah has historically produced more power than we consume. That is going to remain a challenge. And so this did not force the power plant to stay open. That's a mischaracterization of what the bill does. It does not do that. There is a process where it is possible that it will stay open, but we have to go through that process.
Mr. Lyman, same question.
Yeah, we created an entity that has as much sovereignty, if not more, in Delta than Delta County itself. And so to say that it's a private company is a little bit of a misnomer, as the governor said. We have an interest in providing affordable, dispatchable, clean energy to the citizens of Utah. And if we're going to not take the actual public side of these companies that are producing this and at least instruct them on that part of it, then we're failing in that responsibility. Now, I'm all for private enterprise. I would love to see more free private companies start up in Utah, oil refineries, gas refineries, nuclear power plants. I'd love it if Utah was a sanctuary state for the energy development, and we would tell the federal government to back off on those plans and let us produce the energy in Utah that we need. But yeah, this particular instance that you're referring to, this is not really a private, and entirely a private company.
Let's turn now to taxes. Do tax incentives for out-of-state companies help or hinder in-state business growth? First response, Mr. Lyman.
Well, again, we're talking about incentivizing companies to come to Utah in an economy that's already red hot, very low unemployment. These companies are coming to the Wasatch Front where the population is dense. It's creating the need for high-density housing. It's congesting the roads, and we're going out of our way to give these companies tax incentives. Now, I like companies. I like big companies, but not to go out and recruit them to come to Utah. If they want to come to Utah, they should be coming here because we have the best workforce in the nation, because we have the best climate in the nation, because we're family-friendly. All of these things that attract these companies to Utah. If we have to go a step further and give them tax incentives to bring them here, not only are we creating the problems that we're trying to resolve in our water and our congestion, but it's not fair to those companies who've already invested their time and their energy and their livelihoods to build up a company in Utah. And that is not, again, it's not the proper role of government to pull companies into Utah.
Same question, Mr. Cox.
Yeah, so sadly, every state in the nation has tax incentive programs to incentivize businesses to relocate or expand. I hate it. I wish every state would get rid of them, but sadly, they're not going to. So we have ours. Ours is one of the most conservative anywhere in the country. And this is something I actually ran on 4 years ago, and I'm proud that we got a bill passed that completely changed the way we do incentives in this state. We're doing far fewer incentives on the Wasatch Front than ever before because they actually do have to take into account how much water they're going to use, how much traffic they're going to add to our roads, how much housing they're going to need. They have to, the board has to look at all of those things before they can even offer an incentive. And what we did that is even better is we changed the incentive program to do more in rural Utah, where we were not seeing the growth. We do want companies to relocate from the Wasatch Front or who are coming from outside the state of Utah and have them relocate in rural Utah. I'm proud to say that for the first time now, more than half of any incentives that are going out are actually going to rural Utah, not the Wasatch Front. That's a big change. We still have further to go, but we're getting closer.
Another comment or question from X. This comes from Michael Jolly. A follow-up, so 30 seconds each on this. Should Utah eliminate the state income tax? We'll go first to Mr. Lyman.
When Mr. Paxton was here from Texas, the Attorney General, I sat down to talk to him about this issue. And he said, Utah should consider getting rid of the income tax. And I started looking at that and the states that do get rid of the income tax. It's usually based on a production tax, based on oil and gas or coal, severance taxes. And Utah has a rich abundance of natural resources. I believe that we are doing ourselves a disservice when we shut down our coal-fired power plants. If we were more dependent on production taxes, it would drive more of the legislative preference to those productive industries.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Cox.
Yeah, I would love to be able to get rid of the income tax. And that's exactly right. In the states that have been able to do that, they've been able to do it by putting an excise tax on those natural resources. And the benefit that Texas and others have is that most of their land is private land, not public land, and they don't have the federal government controlling things. That's where we have to push back. Once we win at the Supreme Court and we're not relying on the federal government, we would be able to make that change.
In your view, what is the maximum population our state infrastructure can support, and is there a limit? First response to Mr. Cox.
Again, a false choice. There is no actual limit to what infrastructure and industry and innovation can allow in our state. I want to make sure that our kids and grandkids get to live in the best state in the nation. I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish that makes us literally the best state in the nation. That's not me talking. U.S. News and World Report look at 70 different categories, over 1,000 data points, and for the second year in a row, Utah was named the best state in the nation. Now, I would love, as I said, I would love to build a wall around Utah and make California pay for it, but we can't do that. So what we have to do is we have to be really smart. Growth is neither good nor bad. Growth is neutral. The way we respond and invest in infrastructure makes the difference of keeping a quality of life high, making sure that we're building enough starter homes so that our kids and grandkids can live here, making sure that we're being really smart about how we use our water. We are doing all of those things. The state of Utah has invested more in infrastructure over the past 4 years since I've been governor than any state in the nation, and more than any time in our state's history, so that we can keep the quality of life high and keep our kids and grandkids here.
Mr. Lyman.
This is a big state, mostly owned by the federal government. There is space. There's space to branch out. There are places where communities should exist. I've got a few in mind that could have towns the size of Page, Arizona, or even St. George. A number of those on the southern end of the state. We owe it to those communities to allow them to grow and to evolve in their own natural, organic way. As soon as government comes in and says, well, you can't build here because of some endangered species or because of some environmental hazard, and you must build here because we're going to throw a bunch of money into this, or we want people into these urban areas. And this is what we've seen. We've seen a compaction of people into the urban areas. Utah is one of the most urban states in the nation. Even though we have all of this land, most of the people live in the city, and we occupy 1 or 2% of the land mass for our communities. We could definitely expand that out and provide the infrastructure for a lot of growth.
We'll move now to a short answer portion, 15 seconds for each response. First question, how much of the state's water should go to alfalfa production? Mr. Lyman.
Alfalfa, those farmers that grow alfalfa are the ones that created that water supply. And we don't ship the water off when we ship off the alfalfa. It's dry alfalfa. Anybody that's hauled hay knows that that's the case. I applaud our alfalfa farmers, and the more water they're putting on that alfalfa, the better, I say.
Mr. Cox.
Yeah, alfalfa is a wonderful crop for our state. It survives drought because you can dry it up. So in the dry years, alfalfa farmers stop watering. We cut our farm production by 75% 2 years ago during the driest time of the year. We save water. We built those water systems. Our alfalfa farmers are a godsend to this state, and I'm proud to be one of them.
We've now reached the end of the debate. A random drawing held earlier determined that the first closing statement would go to candidate Phil Lyman. And now, Mr. Lyman, your closing statement.
You know, I love this state. I love living in Utah. I love this country, and I love the Republican form of government that was guaranteed to us by Article 4 of the Constitution. And that is a government where the people are empowered. The Declaration of Independence recognizes the importance of the individual, of the person, that just by virtue of our birth, we're entitled to inalienable rights of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. A state that doesn't push back against the federal government is not a state. They are an administrative subunit of the federal government. They don't do a service to the people. They don't do a service to the United States. We need strong governors who will push back against federal encroachment, who will recognize the division of powers between the legislative and the executive branch within the state, who will recognize the importance of county government, recognize the value of our sheriffs, and push that authority and all of those resources to the local level where they can do the most good. That's what I have a vision for Utah. That's what Utah deserves.
And now, Mr. Cox, your closing statement.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for giving me and Abby and Lieutenant Governor Henderson the honor of a lifetime to serve as your governor over the past 4 years. A few weeks ago, I was with one of the most successful business people in the country, and he said, you know, you have a built-in advantage in Utah. I said, well, what's that? And he said, your people. Everyone I've ever met from Utah is intelligent. They work really hard. They are honest. They love their neighbors and their communities, and they care about their families. We kept talking, and then he said to me, you know, those are Utah values, but they used to be American values. We need Utah's values to be American values again. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in the greatest state in the greatest country on earth. I am so proud of who we are, that is our brand. When people look at Utah, that is what they see. Our country is desperate for that kind of leadership. Our country is desperate for Utah's values. Thank you for what you are doing to keep Utah the best state in America.
Thank you, candidates Spencer Cox and Phil Lyman, for participating tonight and for your dedication to public service. Election Day is Tuesday, June 25th. Contact your county clerk if you have any questions about making your vote count in this election. We greatly appreciate PBS Utah for donating the production facilities to broadcast this debate. We're also very grateful for the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation, Zions Bank, the George S. and Dolores Dore Eccles Foundation, and the Stewart Family Foundation for their generous support of the Utah Debate Commission. This debate and others from previous years are available online at utahdebatecommission.org. I'm Caroline Ballard. Thank you and good night.